What if your cold hands and feet are not just an annoying inconvenience, but your body's way of quietly telling you something about how it's managing blood flow, temperature, and even certain nutrients after 60? Most people assume cold hands and feet are simply a normal, unavoidable part of getting older, something you just accept, reach for another pair of socks, and move on with your day. And in many cases, mild cold sensitivity is indeed a common, harmless part of aging. But sometimes, persistent cold hands and feet point to something more specific happening inside your circulatory system, your thyroid, your nerves, or even your daily habits, and understanding which category you fall into can help you know what's simply worth a sweater and what might be worth a conversation with your doctor. So today we're going to walk through exactly why your hands and feet may feel cold so often after 60, the different underlying mechanisms that can cause this, which signs suggest something worth monitoring more closely, and practical steps you can take to feel more comfortable day to day. Before we begin, remember this video is for education only. If you notice sudden coldness in only one hand or foot, color changes like a bluish or very pale tone, numbness that doesn't resolve, or pain along with the coldness, please seek medical attention promptly, as these can sometimes indicate a more urgent circulatory issue. Now let's begin. Most people ask, why are my hands and feet always cold? But that is actually too broad a question to answer well, because there are several distinct mechanisms that can produce the exact same symptom. The better question is, what is actually happening inside my body that is redirecting or reducing blood flow to my hands and feet specifically? Because your hands and feet sit at the very end of your circulatory system, farthest from your heart, which makes them the first place your body will reduce blood flow to whenever it needs to conserve warmth or redirect resources elsewhere, for any number of underlying reasons. Here is why this becomes more noticeable after 60 specifically. Several natural age-related changes converge to make cold hands and feet considerably more common in this stage of life compared to earlier decades. Blood vessels naturally lose some flexibility with age, becoming slightly less responsive and efficient at adjusting blood flow. Circulation to the extremities can become somewhat less robust due to gradual changes in the smaller blood vessels, called capillaries, that supply your fingers and toes. Thyroid function, which plays a central role in regulating your body's internal temperature and metabolic rate, becomes more likely to shift, sometimes subtly, sometimes more significantly, as you age. And certain nutrient levels, particularly iron and vitamin B12, become more likely to run lower due to changes in digestion and absorption that are common after 60. Each of these factors, individually or in combination, can contribute to hands and feet that feel persistently cooler than the rest of your body. Think of your circulatory system like the water supply for a large, multi-story building. The main pipes near the source, representing your heart and the largest blood vessels, have plenty of pressure and flow. But by the time water reaches the faucets on the very top floor, representing your fingers and toes, that flow depends heavily on the pressure and efficiency of everything happening earlier in the system. If pressure drops somewhere in the middle, if smaller pipes narrow slightly, or if the building deliberately reduces flow to conserve resources during a shortage, the top floor faucets are the first to feel the difference, even though the main supply near the source seems perfectly fine. Your hands and feet function similarly. They are the top floor of your circulatory system, and they are often the first place to reflect changes happening elsewhere in your body. Let's start with the first and most common mechanism, general circulatory changes related to blood vessel flexibility and capillary function. As blood vessels age, they tend to become slightly stiffer and less responsive to the constant, subtle adjustments needed to maintain optimal blood flow to the extremities. Additionally, the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries that deliver blood directly to your fingertips and toes, can become somewhat less efficient over time, partly due to natural aging and partly due to accumulated effects of decades of lifestyle factors like smoking history, sedentary habits, or long-term blood sugar patterns. This general age-related circulatory change is one of the most common, relatively benign explanations for persistently cool hands and feet, particularly when both hands and both feet are affected roughly equally, without other concerning symptoms. The second mechanism involves thyroid function specifically, and this deserves particular attention because it's both common and often overlooked. Your thyroid gland produces hormones that regulate your metabolic rate, essentially controlling how efficiently your body generates heat. An underactive thyroid, a condition called hypothyroidism, becomes considerably more common after 60, particularly in women, though it affects men as well. When thyroid hormone levels run low, your body's overall metabolic rate slows down, which directly reduces the amount of heat your body generates, and this reduced heat production often shows up most noticeably in the extremities first. Beyond cold hands and feet, hypothyroidism often produces other subtle signs, including fatigue, unexplained weight gain, dry skin, thinning hair, and constipation. If cold hands and feet are accompanied by several of these other signs, this is a meaningful pattern worth discussing with your doctor, since a simple blood test can measure thyroid hormone levels directly and, if needed, thyroid hormone replacement medication is generally very effective at resolving these symptoms. The third mechanism involves nerve function, specifically a condition called peripheral neuropathy, which becomes more common after 60, particularly among people with diabetes, though it can occur for other reasons as well. Peripheral neuropathy involves damage or dysfunction of the nerves that extend into your hands and feet, and interestingly, this nerve dysfunction can sometimes produce sensations of coldness even when actual blood flow and skin temperature are relatively normal, because the nerves responsible for accurately sensing temperature are not functioning correctly. This is somewhat different from a true circulatory cause, since the issue lies more in how temperature is being perceived and communicated to your brain, rather than an actual reduction in warmth reaching the area. Peripheral neuropathy often comes with additional symptoms beyond just coldness, including tingling, numbness, a pins and needles sensation, or increased sensitivity to light touch, particularly in the feet before the hands. If you have diabetes or prediabetes and notice these additional sensations alongside cold feet specifically, this is worth mentioning to your doctor, since managing blood sugar effectively is central to slowing or preventing further nerve-related changes. The fourth mechanism involves iron levels and anemia, a condition where your blood carries a reduced capacity for oxygen due to insufficient red blood cells or insufficient iron within those cells. Iron deficiency becomes more common after 60 for several reasons, including reduced dietary iron absorption, certain medications that can affect gut absorption, and in some cases, underlying digestive conditions that interfere with nutrient uptake. When your blood's oxygen-carrying capacity is reduced, your body naturally prioritizes sending available oxygen-rich blood to your core organs first, the heart, brain, and lungs, at the expense of the extremities, which is one reason anemia frequently produces persistently cold hands and feet alongside fatigue, pale skin, shortness of breath with exertion, and sometimes a noticeably faster heart rate. A simple blood test can check for anemia and iron levels, and if low levels are identified, addressing the underlying cause, whether through dietary changes, iron supplementation, or investigating a specific digestive issue, can often improve both the anemia itself and the associated cold sensitivity. The fifth mechanism involves vitamin B12 specifically, which deserves its own separate mention because B12 absorption becomes progressively less efficient with age, independent of diet quality, due to natural changes in stomach acid production that are needed to properly absorb B12 from food. Vitamin B12 plays an important role in nerve function and red blood cell production, meaning a deficiency can contribute to cold extremities through mechanisms that overlap with both the nerve-related and circulatory-related explanations already discussed. B12 deficiency often develops gradually and can produce subtle symptoms initially, including fatigue, mild memory or concentration changes, and tingling in the hands and feet alongside the cold sensation. Because B12 absorption naturally declines with age, some doctors recommend periodic B12 level checks for adults over 60, particularly for those following a largely plant-based diet, since B12 is found almost exclusively in animal products, or for those taking certain medications, such as long-term acid-reducing medications, that can further impair B12 absorption. The sixth mechanism involves a specific circulatory condition called Raynaud's phenomenon, where blood vessels in the fingers and toes narrow more dramatically than normal in response to cold temperatures or stress, temporarily cutting off blood flow to a much greater degree than typical circulatory changes. This often produces a distinctive pattern where fingers or toes turn noticeably white, then sometimes bluish before returning to a red, flushed color as blood flow returns, frequently accompanied by a throbbing or tingling sensation during the recovery phase. While Raynaud's phenomenon can occur at any age, it's worth mentioning here because the distinctive color-changing pattern helps distinguish it from more general age-related coldness, and because in some cases, particularly when it develops later in life rather than in younger adulthood, it can be associated with an underlying autoimmune or connective tissue condition that's worth having evaluated by a doctor, particularly if the episodes are frequent, severe, or affect only one side of the body. The seventh mechanism, and one that's often overlooked simply because it feels less medical, involves certain medications commonly prescribed to adults over 60. Beta blockers, a class of medication frequently used to manage blood pressure and certain heart conditions, work partly by affecting how your blood vessels respond to your nervous system signals, and one common side effect is reduced blood flow to the extremities, producing persistently cold hands and feet in some people who take these medications. If cold hands and feet developed or worsened noticeably around the same time you started a new medication, this is worth mentioning to your prescribing doctor, not necessarily to stop the medication, which may be essential for your heart health, but to discuss whether an adjustment or an alternative approach to managing the side effect might be reasonable. Now let's talk about the eighth and final major factor, And this one is less about an underlying medical condition and more about everyday lifestyle habits that can meaningfully influence how cold your hands and feet feel, particularly when layered on top of any of the mechanisms already discussed. Prolonged sitting, particularly with legs crossed or in positions that reduce blood flow to the lower legs and feet, can meaningfully reduce circulation to the extremities over the course of several hours, an effect that becomes more pronounced with age as baseline circulation efficiency naturally declines. Similarly, smoking has a well-documented effect of constricting blood vessels, directly reducing blood flow to the hands and feet, an effect that can persist for a period of time after each cigarette, compounding with any of the underlying circulatory changes already discussed. Dehydration can also play a subtle role, since adequate blood volume supports more efficient circulation throughout your body, including to the extremities, and mild, chronic dehydration, which becomes more common after 60 as the sense of thirst naturally becomes somewhat less reliable, can contribute to reduced peripheral circulation over time. Now let's talk about what to actually do about this, starting with the simplest, most universally helpful practical steps regardless of the specific underlying cause. Layer your clothing thoughtfully, paying particular attention to your core, since keeping your torso warm helps your body feel less need to redirect blood flow away from your extremities to conserve core warmth. Wearing warm socks, ideally made from wool or a wool blend rather than purely synthetic materials, and properly fitted gloves during colder months provides direct insulation. Moving regularly throughout the day, even brief walks around your home every hour if you sit for extended periods, helps maintain healthier circulation to your hands and feet rather than allowing prolonged stillness to reduce blood flow further. Staying adequately hydrated throughout the day supports healthy blood volume and circulation. And if you smoke, reducing or eliminating smoking is one of the most directly impactful changes you can make for circulation to your extremities specifically, alongside its broader, well-established health benefits. Let's also talk about gentle movement specifically targeted at improving circulation to your hands and feet. Simple exercises such as making a fist and releasing it repeatedly, rotating your ankles in circles, or gently flexing and pointing your toes while seated, can help stimulate blood flow to these areas during periods of prolonged sitting or when you first notice coldness setting in. Some people find that a brief, warm foot soak using comfortably warm rather than very hot water provides temporary relief and can be a pleasant addition to an evening routine, particularly during colder months, though this addresses comfort in the moment rather than any underlying cause. Now, before we go further, let's debunk a few common myths about cold hands and feet after 60. For years, many people believed that cold hands and feet are simply an inevitable, unchangeable part of getting older that nothing can be done about. Some believed that wearing more layers is the only solution available, regardless of the underlying reason for the coldness. Some believed that cold extremities are always harmless and never worth mentioning to a doctor. And some believed that if your hands and feet feel cold but look normal in color, there's nothing to investigate further. But when we look at the range of mechanisms actually capable of producing this symptom, the picture becomes considerably more actionable. The real questions are not simply, do I feel cold, or is this just aging? The better questions are, is the coldness affecting both hands and feet roughly equally, or is it isolated to one side? Are there additional symptoms present, like fatigue, tingling, color changes, or recent medication changes? Has this developed gradually over years, or did it start more suddenly? If the coldness is mild, affects both sides equally, and comes without other symptoms, it may simply reflect normal age-related circulatory changes that respond well to the practical steps discussed today. But if it comes bundled with fatigue, unexplained weight changes, tingling, color changes, or started around a new medication, your body may be telling you something more specific worth investigating. Now let's build a simple, practical checklist you can use to think through your own situation. First, notice whether both hands and feet are affected equally, or if the pattern is different on one side, which may suggest a more localized circulatory issue worth evaluating. Second, take note of any additional symptoms present alongside the coldness, including fatigue, unexplained weight changes, dry skin, hair thinning, tingling, numbness, or noticeable color changes in your fingers or toes. Third, consider whether the coldness developed or worsened around the same time as starting a new medication, particularly a beta blocker or blood pressure medication. Fourth, review your daily habits, including how much time you spend sitting without moving, your hydration throughout the day, and whether you smoke. Fifth, if you have diabetes or prediabetes, pay particular attention to any tingling or numbness in your feet specifically, since this combination is worth discussing with your doctor regarding peripheral neuropathy. Sixth, if you follow a largely plant-based diet or take long-term acid-reducing medication, consider asking your doctor about checking your vitamin B12 levels, Seventh, if you're unsure where your particular pattern fits, a simple conversation with your doctor, potentially including basic blood work checking thyroid function, iron levels, and B12, can clarify which category applies to your specific situation far more reliably than guessing based on symptoms alone. Let's also touch briefly on diet, since certain nutritional patterns can support healthier circulation over time, beyond just addressing specific deficiencies. Foods rich in iron, such as lean meats, beans, and leafy greens, support healthy oxygen-carrying capacity in your blood. Foods containing vitamin B12, primarily found in animal products like eggs, dairy, and meat, or fortified foods for those following plant-based diets, support both nerve function and red blood cell production. Omega-3 fatty acids, found in fatty fish like salmon or in walnuts and flaxseed, have been associated in some research with modest improvements in blood vessel flexibility and circulation over time. None of these dietary changes work as an immediate fix, but as part of a broader, sustained pattern, they support the underlying systems responsible for healthy circulation to your extremities. Let's also address a mechanism that deserves particular attention because it carries more direct cardiovascular significance, a condition called peripheral artery disease, where the arteries supplying blood to your legs and feet become narrowed, typically due to a buildup of plaque within the artery walls, similar to the process that can affect arteries around the heart. Peripheral artery disease tends to produce cold feet more prominently than cold hands, since it primarily affects the larger arteries supplying the legs, and it's often accompanied by additional signs, including cramping or aching in the calves during walking that eases with rest, a condition called intermittent claudication, along with skin that may appear shiny, hair loss on the lower legs, and slower healing of any cuts or wounds on the feet. This is a more significant condition than general age-related circulatory changes, since it's associated with broader cardiovascular risk and can potentially affect blood flow to the heart and brain as well, not just the legs. If cold feet are accompanied by calf discomfort during walking, slow healing wounds, or noticeable skin changes on your lower legs, this pattern is worth bringing to your doctor's attention specifically, since peripheral artery disease can often be identified through a simple, non-invasive test comparing blood pressure readings in your ankles and arms. It's also worth discussing the role of stress and your nervous system's fight-or-flight response, since this connects back to Raynaud's phenomenon but applies more broadly as well. When your body perceives stress, whether from an emotionally demanding situation or simply a busy, overstimulating day, your nervous system activates a response that prioritizes blood flow to your core muscles and organs, preparing your body for immediate action, while temporarily reducing blood flow to your hands and feet, since they're not considered essential for that immediate fight-or-flight response. This means chronic stress, or simply a particularly stressful stretch of days, can contribute to hands and feet that feel persistently cooler than usual, independent of any of the other specific mechanisms discussed today. Incorporating stress reduction practices, such as the slow, paced breathing technique that activates your body's calmer, parasympathetic nervous system, can offer a supporting benefit here as well, gently encouraging blood flow back toward your extremities rather than keeping your body in a prolonged state of redirecting resources elsewhere. Had normal thyroid function, normal iron and B12 levels, and no signs of diabetes or neuropathy, but still experience persistently cold hands and feet? In this situation, the coldness likely reflects the more general, age-related circulatory changes discussed earlier, involving natural blood vessel stiffening and reduced capillary efficiency that occurs gradually with age, without pointing to any specific treatable condition. This is not a dismissive explanation, but rather a genuinely common and largely benign pattern that responds well to the practical daily steps covered today: layering clothing thoughtfully, staying active, staying hydrated, and using targeted movement or warm soaks for comfort, even without a single specific underlying cause to treat directly. And what about people who notice their cold hands and feet seem to be getting progressively worse over just the past few months, rather than a pattern that's been present gradually for years? A noticeably new or rapidly worsening pattern, particularly compared to a long-standing, stable tendency toward cold extremities, is generally more worth bringing to your doctor's attention promptly, since a changing pattern is more likely to reflect a specific, potentially treatable underlying factor, whether that's a new medication, a developing thyroid change, or another specific mechanism, rather than simply gradual, long-term aging. Now let's summarize everything in a simple way. Cold hands and feet after 60 can stem from several distinct mechanisms, including general age-related circulatory changes involving blood vessel stiffening and reduced capillary efficiency, an underactive thyroid slowing your body's overall heat production, peripheral neuropathy affecting how temperature is sensed and communicated by your nerves, anemia or low iron reducing your blood's oxygen-carrying capacity, vitamin B12 deficiency affecting both nerve function and red blood cells, Raynaud's phenomenon causing more dramatic blood vessel narrowing in response to cold or stress, certain medications like beta blockers affecting blood vessel responsiveness, and everyday lifestyle factors like prolonged sitting, smoking, and mild dehydration. Understanding which of these patterns matches your specific experience, based on which additional symptoms are present, whether the pattern is new or long-standing, and whether it affects one side or both, can help you know whether simple, practical daily adjustments are likely sufficient, or whether a conversation with your doctor and some basic blood work would provide valuable clarity. But remember, mild, long-standing cold hands and feet that affect both sides equally without other symptoms are a very common and generally benign part of the aging process for many people, not something to feel alarmed about. The goal of today's video is not to create worry, but to help you recognize when this common symptom is simply worth a warmer pair of socks, and when it might be worth a more specific conversation with your doctor, so you can address the actual underlying cause rather than simply layering on more clothing indefinitely. So today, take a moment to notice your own pattern. Are both hands and feet affected equally? Are there other symptoms present alongside the coldness? Has anything changed recently, whether a new medication or a shift in your daily routine? Use this simple self-check to decide whether the practical steps covered today are likely enough for you, or whether it's worth bringing this pattern up at your next doctor's visit. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you experience cold hands and feet regularly, and have you noticed any specific pattern, whether it's related to the weather, a particular time of day, or certain activities? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story may help someone else watching this video recognize a pattern in their own body they hadn't considered before. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe to Nutri, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more simple, practical health strategies for adults over 60. And next, watch our video on what happens when you eat 2 bananas every day after 60, because how your body manages circulation, nutrients, and everyday habits all work together to support how you feel, day after day, for years to come.